All right. It's like being in Catholic school. Everyone's quiet, doing pipes down. All right. Good evening, everybody. Welcome to the Town of New Shoreham Town Council public hearing for the fiscal year 2023 budget, Wednesday, March 30th, 2022. Call the meeting to order at 7:05. The New Shoreham Town Council is holding a hybrid meeting in person and via Zoom telecommunications pursuant to State of Rhode Island Executive Order 22-20 dated February 18th, 2022. To participate, quote, raise your hand on your phone by pressing *9, mute and unmute by pressing *6. To see supporting documents for this agenda, they are up on the New Shoreham Clerk Base page, or if you would like to tune into the meeting, it's on our New Shoreham YouTube page. First item on the agenda is the public hearing for the budget, but I do believe there was some revenue that needed to be go over before the public hearing, before we open the public hearing. So with that, I will turn that over to Mary Ann or Amy, Finance Director. Thank you. Thank you, Amy.
Take this with me for a minute.
Take that with you.
Before we actually get into revenue, I do want to make sure that people know that there is a new version of the budget. Down in the lower right-hand corner, it says public hearing, dated March 30th, 2022. I believe that is on Clerk Base as well.
Right in the file.
There are hard copies on the table. And if you don't have one handy, the material changes are really minor. It does unwrap the wage lines, which was a request of the council. It also makes adjustment for the health and dental decreases that we talked about previously, and reinstates the 3 recommended positions that the town manager is recommending the council reconsider, which is the Director of Human Services, the Director of Human Resources, and the Library Youth Librarian. So those are the changes that are in the new version, again, dated March 30th and indicated public hearing.
If you don't mind, Andre, I'd just like to thank Marianne and Amy for doing that, because we discussed in the last meeting about breaking some of those out, and I appreciate it. Thank you very much.
Great. With that, very quickly, I'd like to walk you through revenues. Page 2 starts with taxes. And as we've discussed, the proposed budget does include an increase in the tax levy of 6.1% above the 4% cap. And that's allowable under the debt service exemption. It also does reflect a higher collection rate than we've seen recently. Based on history of the last 18 months or so, we've moved that collection rate up to 99%. That means the second line there with prior year collections is actually a reduction, which is a little bit counterintuitive, but we're collecting much more in the current year, which is not a bad trend. The other line there, motor vehicle taxes, is the last line, which is a little bit up in the air. This is the last year of the reimbursement by the state for motor vehicle taxes. It's the end of their phase out program. But because motor vehicle values have actually appreciated so significantly in the last year, they suspect that the final reimbursements will actually be higher than what they're estimating today. So you see a difference there between the requested and the recommended amounts. And that's based on guidance from the state about where the final values may actually end up. It's important to note, I say it just so that people also aren't surprised when they get their individual tax bills. Because again, if those car values have appreciated, it's not just the state reimbursement that goes up, but actually the individual tax bill. Unless there are questions on taxes, we'll move ahead to page 3, which is licenses, permits, and fees. And most of the change here is going to be in Other clerks' licenses and fees. You can see a recommended level for 2023 of $250,000. That's really driven by a number of different elements, but the trend certainly escalated in 2021. We're not expecting quite that higher revenue. Those in 2021 were really driven by property transfers. Those have slowed somewhat, but are still at a high level. And also the clerk's office is collecting a lot more revenue based on their electronic systems. And that sort of electronic record system is bringing in significantly more revenue. The other line that I would call your attention to then is building permits, where the discrepancy from year to year is not moving that much, but certainly has appreciated since, say, 2020. So our recommended levels for 2023 is 200,000. But we've seen that be a little more spiky over the years. And we've talked about that a few times, that the predictability of those large permits is getting a little bit harder. So it's definitely a possibility that in any given year, you have one major construction project that significantly skews those revenues. That's why we try to keep a more conservative baseline, so you don't get caught on the downside, you only get caught on the upside. If there are no other questions, we can turn to page 4. Other town fees and income. And like we saw on the expense side, we're aggregating these a little bit more clearly by function. Again, the lines on the page haven't changed. We're just laying them out in a way that hopefully aggregates them more clearly. In the current year, harbors, we know, increased their fees. So the year-to-date numbers are reflecting those. That also means that there's been a little bit of shift in the recommended levels for 2023 as those shake out. You're particularly seeing it in mooring waitlist fees, where we've had some adjustments based on that program being implemented. And you see a little bit of shift as well in the rental moorings and the private rental moorings. Recreation, again, some shifts as their program goes back to a regular cycle, sort of a pre-COVID program where you've got the ski trip and other things planned. And that's, again, both a revenue and expense. You're matching those programs together. The second part of other town fees and income moves on to page 5. You do have a reduction in the line insurance and other recoveries. That was some insurance recoveries that the town was seeing related to workers' comp. That's going to be a decline in revenue, but also an offsetting decline in the expenditure side. So both sides are moving together. Questions on other town fees and income?
I had a quick question about Coast Guard Station. How do we how does that get set? Does it include just the Coast Guard building itself, or the entire property, including the chief's house? How does that all work?
Station. It's just the station house where you have the seasonal employees and the property manager who are remitting rent for those. I would say reviewed periodically, not annually.
What about the chief's house that chief is living in? Rent on that, or is that?
If you remember correctly, if you go back into his contract, that in lieu of health insurance, we trade off of the rent.
Yes.
You all good? Keith? Okay. Phil McComb? Oh, wait. Hold on. All right, yep. We haven't opened the public hearing. We haven't opened the hearing. Wait till we open the hearing. Just wait till we open the hearing. I'm just going through revenues now.
This is just explanation on the revenue, is all I'm asking, just
because I don't understand something, so it's not.
Wait to the public hearing. It's gonna be in like a minute. And you're gonna have to get a microphone for the public at home too, just if you want to speak on them. Is there any more comments from the council?
Thank you.
I had one quick question that's maybe unfair, but is anything on the revenue side of this, is there anything that sort of keeps you awake that, that you worry about? Oh, gosh.
We'll get there in 1 second. If you
Oh, okay.
And it's not as much as in some years it could be.
Yeah.
Yeah, I wouldn't say it's a keeping awake at night, but on page 6 is where you have state aid. And most of these are fixed or set solidly through the state appropriation process. The exception is in the hotel and cottage and meals taxes. The numbers that you see there are based on the state estimates, and you can see that the amounts for hotel and cottage taxes have gone up significantly. Again, these are based on the state estimates. In some years, we have used our own. In this case, I'm sticking with their estimates. And in fact, we had a significant chunk of cottage tax money come in for the month of March, which means we are trending towards that number. But if there was one part of the budget that I was a little bit uncertain, it's that right there. Sure. In general, since our revenues have been strong in the last few years, I'm comfortable with that, but it's the one area. Other questions on state aid? So the last revenue page then is page 7, where you have reserves and transfers in. There's one line item budgeted for 23, and that is a transfer from the land trust as a reimbursement for their debt service, which is paid through the town. We are not in 23 anticipating any use of either reserve funds because we haven't hit our target levels, or infrastructure fund dollars, since we expect that infrastructure fund to be fully expended.
Okay,
That's the end of revenues.
council, any questions on the revenue before we open the public hearing for public comment?
Do we expect to get any other money into the infrastructure fund?
Not really at this point. We do have what Jamie has, and I just had a discussion about yesterday about the this fiscal year. Keep in mind, we did have an easement with National Grid of $26,000 for each time they were here, this time and also the last time, which totals about $52,000. And based on where the council may go with that budget, we may have a recommendation that you designate that as infrastructure fund for the 2023 capital budget.
And that's going to be the end of National Grid.
That is correct. Is there anything, I think we pretty much depleted the account last year.
Right. Everything that's currently been set aside for the infrastructure fund has been earmarked for expenditures.
Make a motion, we open the public hearing. Seconded by Sven. All those in favor, Keith, Mark,
Aye.
Sven,
Aye.
I'm in favor, Martha. Sven says to open the public hearing. Bill McComb.
I was just gonna ask, could Amy explain the, just what the motor vehicle the tax in lieu of, I just don't understand what it is. But then we receive from the state, I know there's a regular tax.
Sure. So the motor vehicle taxes in lieu is a direct reimbursement from the state for the portion of motor vehicle value that they exempt from taxes under state law. And so if you recall, the state 5 years ago, roughly, implemented a program that increased the amount exempt from tax as the state moved to phase out motor vehicle taxes. And so we're moving into the last year of that program.
I'll direct the judge. So this makes up for the pot that gap, is that what it was?
Exactly.
Thank you.
We, in theory.
Yeah.
Anybody else, public? David Lewis?
This is probably the easiest question I'll ever ask. On the state road agreement, that seems to stay stable year after year after year, and I assume that's mostly wages, wage and labor costs and other material costs directly related to the state roads. Why is that number always the same value? Going back to history that's shown, and it seems to me like it's always been around that number.
Can you start off with what were you asking about with that, what item? I didn't hear you. I'm just wondering what item you were asking about.
Oh, I'm sorry. State road agreements. Page 6, $425,000 in annual revenue and income.
Yep.
You're right, page 5.
Item 4400.
Amy?
So I'm going to take a stab first for Mary Ann. It has been consistent. That's because the last time the town negotiated that agreement with the state, they agreed on a fixed amount for a 10-year term. I believe that expires in 2024. For the first 10 years of that agreement, 2004 to 2014, it actually did have an escalation clause, and it just got a little bit cumbersome and wasn't necessarily reflective of the recalculations every year weren't an efficient use of time and effort. So we instead agreed on a flat amount for the next 10-year term. And I would assume that would be renegotiated going forward.
And that's the only thing I'm not sure of the exact date of when it expires. So when you got up there, David, I said, oh my God, I don't know when it expires.
Thank you.
Thank you, David.
That sounds right.
Yeah, it does. I know it's 10 years, but I didn't know when it was 2004.
Any other comments from the public? Liz Dyer?
I was gonna write a Liz Dyer. I was gonna write a letter, but I just didn't have the time. I just want to speak about the Block Island Volunteer Fire Rescue and all that. And I listened to the last meeting about the $50,000 request. And my concern is really just a proposition and some food for thought for all of you. I'm a community member. I'm on the rescue squad. I was a medical provider. You all know my history. I had 2 fires recently, one nearby, one at our house, late at night, false alarm and a real one. And I just can't stress enough how we scream in this town about we need to get the youth involved. We need to get, the only place that's getting youth involved is right here.
I think I had mentioned that last year.
You
how
did.
Successful it was.
Which is why
and
I'm
very impressive.
dovetailing on that. It takes kids who are really struggling, and I see that, and it tries to keep them in line. So that doesn't have a price tag. But when I look at what they do, they don't close on weekends, they don't close on holidays, they're not paid, they generate their own funds, and they really bring esprit de corps for it's a fallen firefighter or rescue, as we saw with Everett or Pete Monge or Marty. There's such a sense of fellowship and community there. I don't think it can be measured. I don't think it can be quantified. So my only thought is I just want to wish them all the support they can get from this town council, because that is who's going to be running this town one day. And you all know it. So that was it. I didn't have the words to write it. It's just
Thank
a public comment.
Thank you. And I think it's, you mentioned the kids, but I also think it's also a place for grown men to, not just the kids, it's the grown men too. But I agree with you 100%. And thank you for the comments. Judy Gray?
Thank you. Judy Gray, resident. I submitted 2 letters to the town council regarding the budget. The first, should I read them, or is it important you have them?
We have them.
Oh, okay, so I don't need to go through them. I'd like to read one.
Are they, hold on, are they up on clerk base?
Yeah.
Oh, you haven't?
Okay,
All right, you know what? Then go ahead and read it into the
Okay, thank
record,
you.
and we'll get them on clerk base from the correspondence. Did you
Okay.
send them to Millie?
I probably did not, but I will.
Okay.
I
yeah.
sent them to all you guys. Yeah,
Um,
okay, Thank you. As the chair of the town's nascent Sea Level Rise Committee, I was asked if the committee had a financial request in the current budget cycle. And my honest answer is no, not this year. We need a website and an email address, and I'm working with the town manager on gaining that, and anything that you can do to support the town's IT upgrade will have a direct and important impact on the Sea Level Rise Committee, and that'd be very helpful. We are receiving non-financial support already from NOAA Sea Grant and NOAA's Narragansett Bay National Marine Estuary Reserve. So those are national levels of support, and from the state of Rhode Island's Coastal Resource Management Council and Department of Environmental Management. All of these groups have been helping the Sea Level Rise Committee figure out how to start to address the myriad sea level rise related challenges and do so in a sustainable way. All of these entities are working hard on behalf of Block Island. They want us to succeed in enhancing our resilience to projected sea level rise. Securing town resources and or applying for external grants for capital investment in sea level rise projects will be a big challenge for this committee due to the scale of the issues the committee seeks to address. It will require an investment of some town financial and human resources to be successful. So while it's premature at this time to submit a request to the town, the Sea Level Rise Committee wishes to make the town aware of identified areas where this assistance may be needed, including but not limited to project leadership, data collection, management and access, public education and engagement, expertise in changing policy codes and ordinances, and cost benefit analyses. And I am making a commitment that on behalf of the entire Sea Level Rise Committee to creating a plan cooperatively with the town that would justify any requests that would come from this committee. So are there any questions on that? Okay. The second letter that I submitted is in support of the Senior Advisory Committee. And this one's very personal. This is a note of acknowledgement, encouragement, and appreciation. It is deeply gratifying that the town of New Shoreham is furthering its commitment to human services in general and to the Senior Advisory Committee in particular. Thanks to the efforts of the Senior Advisory Committee, Block Island is becoming a place where more of us can age in place. Personally, by helping my family find a caregiver, the Senior Advisory Committee made it possible for my father to age and pass away at home. Now, my sister and I care for our aging mother. The caregiver support group continues to be an important lifeline, both for connecting with others going through similar experiences and for having access to a trained therapist. The Senior Advisory Committee sponsored education programs from which my family has directly benefited, included presentations by an estate planner, the Parkinson's Foundation, the Alzheimer's Association, and many more. Receiving a delicious meal once a month gives the caregivers a much appreciated break and connects seniors with others outside our small circle. These are just a few of the benefits offered by the Senior Advisory Committee that have enabled us to live as seniors on Block Island. Thank you for supporting the Senior Advisory Committee. In addition to specific benefits, the activities of the Senior Advisory Committee send a message that the island's senior citizens and their caregivers matter and are thought of beyond the family. That Block Island washes out for its elders is something I love and appreciate most about living here. Thank you.
Thank you, Judy. As a point of reference to just the public, if you send a note or an email to us, the best way to get it distributed to us is by sending it to Millie. I wasn't aware that you didn't have it.
Sorry.
I will forward that to you.
Oh, I'll take care of it.
Yeah, that'd be great, because we do have it. Much appreciated.
Ask a question to Sven, Judy and Sven. Is there a plan to sort of have regular interactions between the council and Sea Level Rise? Because it just seems, that there's gonna be more issues rather than less issues, and it seems like the less surprises there are over time, the better.
So we've spent the last 5 months really trying to get our act together internally to the committee, just even getting the 10 of us to agree on what are our priorities. And we've run a pretty rigorous process for, really listening to the whole committee and then, narrowing down our focus. Where there will be a short presentation at the town council at their April 4th meeting. And I hope to be a regular presenter for your meetings, yes.
Anybody else have any public comment tonight on the budget? Jessica Willie?
I hesitate because this is a dumb question, but I am always not only impressed with the budget process of the town, but in Amy's ability to explain everything in a really simple way so that I can understand it. So I think I'm understanding that, I mean, taxes and fees, revenues are strong. They're coming in strong. Obviously, we can't bank on them before, but I'm looking at the overall budget picture. Can you explain, or could you ask Amy to explain? It's, you know, there's some things in the budget that are tight, but it seems like revenues are really high. So I know, like, I get it. I know there's a lot of expenses in the town. Just so like an overall picture, revenues are strong, but we're still, you know, can't find the $50,000 or whatever it is for fire or whatever. So can you broadly explain that a little bit? Because that's, you know, what I hear around town is that, oh, all this money is coming in. I think I hear it a lot because of tourism. So.
Thank you, Jessica.
Sure. And that's more of a big picture question, so I'm going to do my best. I would say that revenues are strong, and I think we've reflected those where it's appropriate. You know, an example is that hotel and meals tax in a year or a stretch of years where things are tight. We would haircut that and say, you know what, that's just a little too risky of a limb to stand on. Since there has been strength in other areas, that's where we can budget for that revenue at the state recommended level, even though I'm not really sure that that's all going to come in the way that they think it will, because I think we've been appropriate in other areas. And I'm comfortable that there's enough offset. If that doesn't deliver, then it may be a year where building permits do have that extra big permit. And there's enough room to be a little bit aggressive in some areas without being tight everywhere. And there are years where we do that. Don't get me wrong. There have been times where we say, you know what, it's just not worth that risk because everything is coming in just a little bit underperforming. And then you have the disconnect, I would say, between strong revenues and you still have a budget, which means expenses have to be planned for and they have to be in line with the state law. And no matter how strong those revenues might be, we still have to be constrained and our needs are always greater than the dollars that we have. And there are hard choices to make. So I don't know if that helps or.
Today. Thank you.
Thank you, Amy. Martha?
I think it's also important to note that it's not, there isn't just one department that didn't get what requested. I think that's, if you're listening to this, that may be the way it sounds, but I'm just flipping through this to be sure that I'm right before I say that, because it's, and there are a number that didn't get what they requested. And I think an overview is important.
I think that's definitely fair to say that at every department level, somebody didn't get everything they wanted. It's certainly no, nobody was an outright winner. There's, I guess, one other thing that I would add, and that gets to when revenues are strong and expenditures are within budget. That is where we start to build up our reserves. And we have a policy that says if we find ourselves in a place where those have built up sufficiently and there are excess, then we have a process for using them. So we're not just over collecting revenue on and on and on. There's a threshold at which we say, okay, we've built up enough savings and it's appropriate to use those for one-time expenditures and things like that. And, I could see if next year follows the trend that we've been seeing, we may trigger that. And you have an opportunity to spend down some revenue that you've accumulated. So, we have that stop as well, that if our revenues are strong repeatedly, then we're not over collecting, if you will.
Amy, what's that magic number percentage? 20%?
Sure.
Is that what you said?
Yep, our reserve target is 15 to 20%. And so anything over 20%, we have a policy for how those revenues can be used when we hit that threshold. The same way if we have a deficit, as we did in 20, if we fall below that 15% threshold, we have a mechanism for how we need to restore them.
Let me just, Bill, hold on, Mike LaFaro.
Question, Amy, is that reserve number, what is it currently?
17%.
No, the amount, dollar amount. And, okay, finish that one first. And where is that in the budget? The amount we're putting away each year?
It's not in the budget, it's in the audit report. We don't report that in the budget, it's in the audit report.
Okay, is the audit report online? I haven't looked for it.
I know the old ones, I'm not sure if that one's been put up yet. Let me look. Let's see.
Sorry, they insist that I use the mic. So the unreserved fund balance of the town was just under 4 million, $3,917,318, which is again 17% of budgeted expenditures. And it's not a number that shows up in the budget because we don't budget to build reserves unless we are in a deficit situation. So that's not something we plan for or aggressively build up unless we've actually fallen below that threshold. It just is something that occurs through collecting additional revenue in a particular year, if that's clear.
Thank you. And it's 3,008,000 and
3,900,000.
900,000. And it's the audit report online?
It doesn't look that way. There's a bunch of old ones here. We just got the audit report at the end of, it was due December 31st, so we can get that put up.
Could that be posted online so we
Oh, yeah.
can see it?
Oh, yeah, because all the other ones are.
Thank you.
It would be on Clerkbase, the meeting that we.
Yeah, it would, it's on clerk base though. What meeting was that?
Bill McComb?
I wouldn't go in department by department, I'm just confused on
Yeah.
the budget.
I'm just looking to see if anybody has any questions off the top now, and then we'll go department by department.
Okay, so there'll be an opportunity department by department.
Sure.
Okay,
Yep.
thank you.
Any other general questions? All right. Steve, hold on. Department by department, okay. Under administration, anything? Any changes, comments, questions on administration? That would be on page 8. Go ahead, Mike.
We have a new line there, 60,000 requested, 40,000 put out for the, I think it's the lobbyist. Set up new line.
That is a new line. What line are you on? What number is that?
5405.
It's 5405.
Yep. All right.
So it's an expense we have not had in the past, is what you're saying?
It is.
Okay.
Any other comments on administration? Legal? I will note that we did put out our request for proposals for legal fees. I mean, not legal fees, a new, like, town solicitor. We had 3 responses. Neither of them was Kathy Marola. So we will be interviewing, I think, next week for a new town solicitor. That item, I guess, will be in flux because we don't know what that cost is gonna be yet. Legal, I guess, right? Mary Ann?
Yeah, I think would, not too much in flux. I mean, you may have a
Right.
little bit, but
Right.
just not too much in flux. Because currently you still, all the other attorneys are currently in place. This is strictly for the municipal side. Your land use attorney is staying and your labor attorney.
Town clerk, any comments on the town clerk? I don't see any. General administration? Bill McComb?
Can you just explain the housing?
A second, when I get to that line. Amy?
Sure. So that's line 5225 housing at $8,164. That's a contractual amount, a housing stipend for the town manager.
Go ahead, Bill.
So I assume that there's rent on the house, the income comes in separately, it's just not clear.
Yes.
Yeah, if you, sorry. Where'd it go? On page 4, there's a line item 4293 for Thomas property rent. That's going to be, depending on which year you're looking at, the town manager's house and, when appropriate, the rental of the Thomas property as well. So it may be combined depending on how those have been filled.
Okay.
Is it combined now? Trying to keep up.
So I believe that the fiscal year 23 amount reflects just the town manager's house because we anticipate that the Thomas property itself will be under reconstruction.
So we anticipate no income on the Thomas house for
23, correct.
Right. There's people living in the Thomas house now, correct? Do we get rent for that?
Yes, we do.
Okay.
Yeah.
And where does that rent show up in here?
Where you put it, you know. It will show up on that line item, Bill.
Go ahead.
Would that be part of this? And I apologize, so the Thomas property has 2 rental units on it, has the house and the Thomas house.
Yes.
Okay, so on the number that's represented here is anticipated rent from both properties. Correct?
Amy, you may as well just stand up there. Appreciate it.
But I want somebody else to be able to use the mic. So the recommended amount for fiscal year 23 is just the manager's house, because we are expecting that there will be no tenants in the Thomas property. For all other years, it is both properties combined. Is that clear?
Yes, so then as of July 1, we anticipate no one living in the Thomas house, so there'll be no revenue.
That's what's currently budgeted.
Okay. So we may get money if something changes, but currently budgeted.
Right.
Thank you.
Any other comments under general administration? Admin, dear management, human services, municipal alarm. Any questions on that? Comments? Finance, questions or comments on finance? Bill McComb.
On the DM management, that, those funds are going for, I know they apart from a hospital pool or something, is that, no? I don't know, I may can explain what the 12,000 goes to. I know they're hoping to expand or something, does this include anything?
If you're talking about the refrigerator truck, the answer is no.
No. So can I ask what the 12,000 is used for?
Yeah, I think, Amy.
At this point, it's just contemplated to be a continuation of the tags and the tails program. Yep, reimbursements for tags and reimbursements for tails, 2 different rates.
Any other comments on the administration part? Down to fine. Go ahead.
As a real quick one, Bill, do you see that number as relatively conservative? Would love it to be higher, and that higher sort of reflects your comment a second ago about housing in Thomas. So they may balance all out, you know, we'll see what all goes.
Any comments on finance? Go ahead, Bill.
Is that, how did we do this year with the 12,000 as far as what we gave out, was it?
Where are you? You still on?
I'm on the deal, that was the 12,000. So we budgeted 12,000, you know, and if it was a reimbursement, which is a good program, did we use all that? Is that something?
I know Charlene was just working on those deer tags or whatever they are, just this week. She got all the information, the numbers didn't look quite right, and we found out the state went to a new software program and there were some problems with the numbers. So we're waiting to get that cleaned up.
Will be prepared for that number at the next public hearing?
I can't answer that until I talk to Charlene to see where the status is.
Okay.
And the reason I bring that up is I think that tag program is beneficial, that's the way we get it done, so hopefully that's enough to cover all that. So.
You all set with deer?
It's beneficial, but it's still a Band-Aid.
Finance. Any comments, questions? That line item. Moving on, fire rescue emergency management. Additional comments, questions, fire management, fire emergency management?
Can I ask a quick accounting question?
Yes, Keith, go ahead.
If the rescue squad were to change, you know, that we heard the other night they're in the process of potentially changing to a system where non-residents would pay for that service. Would that revenue show up in the town budget or the fire and rescue budget?
That discussion hasn't taken place
Oh,
yet.
okay. That literally was just an accounting question. I was curious how that works.
I've seen it done publicly.
Oh, okay.
Bill McComb.
On the,
Oh.
on the dispatchers, under the training, I believe educational training, which is I think $350. I just know that, I just question why that number is so low. It's boy, we were talking about the doctor's office and receiving calls and then having and so forth and so on. I just didn't know. This is extremely low for the department training.
We all had that question because a bunch of we all sort of value the training. And what we learned is that maybe the sole positive thing that came out of COVID is that so many of these programs have moved online that there's far less expense associated with it. I'm not talking about the, hands-on training that the fire department does and rescue does and those sorts of things, but in sort of the less hands-on, if you will, I don't know what the right phrase is, but a lot of that stuff has transitioned to being online and is less expensive.
So fire rescue, as I just said to Liz Dyer, I fully support fully funding that department. So for the next public hearing, if that department was fully funded, it's like to another 50,000, I think it is. Could you produce like an impact on that, or that's personally how I feel?
I'm sorry.
Fire and rescue. Their request was 285.
No, this, that's why I'm asking. This is 356 compared to 349. You're talking to that's community support. We haven't gotten that far.
That's community, yeah.
Yeah, this is fire rescue. This is mostly the dispatches and the building maintenance that we're on right now.
Okay, when we move on, then we have a pretext of what I'm gonna say.
Yeah.
Michael?
I'd like to make a request that when we do the budget next year, we could rename Department 30 to Central Dispatch. That's really what it is. And it gets the public confused with fire and volunteer. I mean, it's Central Dispatch. It's not our department at all. Thank you.
Thank you, Mike. Martha, do you have a comment?
No, it was just the clarification that was made.
Okay. Molly O'Neill, did you have a comment?
Not more, thank you.
Okay. Questions, comments on the topic? David Lewis.
It's sort of ironic that we think that 350, I'm not passing judgment on the dollar value. I'm just passing judgment on the irony of the conversation that we're having. On the training and education budget, 5,700 under fire and rescue and emergency management. So the actual in 2019, 2020, 2021 was zero. And I'm not going to ask anybody to explain the past, but in the current year to date, fiscal year 22, we've still spent zero. So the 350 that is in the current year budget has not been spent yet. Am I reading that correctly?
Yes.
So it's a little bit ironic that that we wonder how much more we should add to the budget next year, when in fact we'd like to deploy resources, maximize resources in the correct spots. Thank you.
Thank you, David. Any more? Police? Comments, questions? Molly, go ahead.
I'm just wondering if I'm reading this correctly, that it asks for 25,000 for body cameras, but it's not recommended to fund that.
That's correct.
It's an excellent reason why not.
So a lot of us had that question the other night.
Keith?
Oh, I'm sorry. A lot of us had that question the other night, and there were really two parts of that answer. One is there's a significant increase in sort of not only staffing, but sort of the infrastructure related to the police department this year. But the other is that there's a fair bit of optimism that we might be able to get grant funding for body cams. The other interesting thing about body cams is that the upfront cost is actually the small cost. It costs thousands of dollars a year to maintain the system and have public access to it, and I'm a big supporter, but it's probably something that's going to take us a couple of years to do, unless we get a great grant fund, which there's some optimism about.
And just if I can add, this was a long discussion with the chief and sort of ended up it's good where we are for the moment.
Okay. I'm not seeing it on, maybe I'm just not seeing it on here. What about new cameras for this station? Is that?
That's in the capital improvement.
Okay, thank you.
It's under surveillance cameras, a couple of places in capital.
And that we can talk about later, but that is in this year, I think.
Right.
Thanks.
Bill McComb?
I guess there was a substantial increase in the reserve program. Can that be explained what that is? It's adding an additional different structure or whatever, or I don't know if it increases, full-time employees or whatever else, but could be some explanation on that.
So there's a couple of things in the police budget regarding reserves and also seasonal employees. What will now happen with the police department, which will be the first time, as I understand it, and first time ever, and this is my understanding that it's been discussion for a number of years, is that we will now have 2 officers on every shifts year round. The increase, which would also be some reserve increase, and then in the summer, we will have a reserve officer on every shift, so there'll be 3 officers on every shift. So that's where you're seeing the increase. On the seasonal side, the increase, the bulk of it is related to the CSOs.
So in order to do this, we'll be hiring how many additional full-time officers?
When the reserve officer is not full-time, the reserves will not be fully loaded with benefits. That's the difference. They're reserve officers. They're not town employees. I mean, they're town employees, they're not part of the union.
Will they be working full-time, 40-hour weeks?
It's a schedule that Matt has come up. It's like 7 days on and 7 days off type of schedule.
So would a reserve officer be employed on a year-round basis as a full-time employee, Someone gets confused as to what's our full-time officer covered by the contract. And if I'm a reserve officer working full-time doing the same thing, I would say, why not just have one chief and one reserve? But I mean, what makes the difference between the two? So if you hire me to work full-time, 40 hours as a reserve year round, and he's full-time.
The reserve officers, it's a 7 day on and a 7 day off.
So are the full-time police officers.
I'm not sure if they do that.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, no, they do fine. To be honest with you, to get into this, I think we need Matt here to explain the scheduling because I don't have the weeds on that one.
He's actually on.
Oh, he's on. All right, let Matt join.
And I don't have an objection to it. I'm just trying to understand if the reserves, the reserves are essentially full-time police officers. Well, how do we define their position as reserve that keeps it not the, at what point do we
I'm gonna let Chief Moynihan answer you that. I think he's online.
Yeah, he is.
Chief,
I didn't
are you
realize
there?
he was online, otherwise I would punch it.
Yes.
Right.
Yes, I am. Good evening. And again, I apologize. I can't be there in person this evening, but to answer the question on the reserve is they're going to work a full-time schedule. They won't be considered a full-time employee with benefits in retirement. But they'll be complementing the additional staff that we have on hand. Currently, we are working a 7-on, 7-off schedule. That will be changed in the summer months. And as the manager indicated, this increase in personnel for the police department will allow us to staff each shift with 2 officers, and in the summertime to have the additional officer to have a 3 as a minimum on each shift. So the line items that's separated there is you have your full-time officers, and those will be the 4 officers that we currently employ that have benefits, have retirement. Then we'll have a line item for reserve officers who will work a full-time schedule, but will not have those same benefits as the 4. The seasonal line item is there. We still will need some officers on a seasonal basis to fill in when there's approved leave, vacation, sick time, anything like that that comes up. And we still need to staff the shifts during the seasonal time. That's what that line item is there. And then lastly, we do have a separate line item for CSOs, and that would cover the salaries for those seasonal CSOs that supplemented us last season.
At which point does a seasonal officer become, a reserve officer become a full-time officer? So if you hire someone to work as a reserve officer year-round, doing the same thing as the full-time officer, where is that the separation between the two, where that person doesn't say, hey, I am entitled to the benefits or whatever it might be, whether it's contracted from the union or not? I just don't know how do you define what the difference is? Or do we never hire another full-time police officer, classify them all as reserves, and you don't have to pay the benefits?
Right. I mean, 2 classes of employees, Bill. One being a full-time police officer who has benefits, and one being a reserve who doesn't. And so there would be potentially an occasion where if we did have an opportunity where one of the full-time position became vacant, a reserve could move into that and now have a different benefit package than they would have. What they will be supplied with is a guaranteed full-time work week.
So does that mean that we will have no more than 4 full-time police officers? No, that's not gonna be 5, it's gonna be 4 or 12. And
That is correct. I mean, that's currently what we have. We have 4 full-time police officers. In order for us to supplement the staffing and to do it with the most cost-effective way for the town, and we're looking at the reserve officers. Again, the reserve officers and who we're targeting there are our retired officers that already are coming to us with a host of years of training and experience, and a really, I think we saw that benefit last season coming in. You know, from your history, as well as, you know, in prior administrations, hiring a new police officer and putting them through the training at a cost of $25,000 before they even hit the street, and then no guarantee that they're going to stick around for a career in the department. This, we feel, is the best approach going forward, is to hire these already trained, seasoned officers, pay them the full-time hourly rate. They're going to work on that 40 hours a week, and you know, and they can supplement our existing staff.
But my concern is not the concept. My concern is, do the full-time officers end up, in other words, do we have our structure within the town, what defines a full-time officer and a reserve officer from our charter, so that we don't have 2 or 3 officers say, I'm now entitled to be a full-time officer because I am fulfilling X, Y, and Z, just so that we're covered from that end of it. That's good. Thank you. Thank you. Right. But it's good to call out.
Question, The 85 that is police coverage, is this the state issue?
That's correct.
We're still working on that.
We are, yes.
Thank you.
I'm sorry.
Should we explain that in case somebody doesn't know what we're talking about?
Hold on, Bill.
Marianne?
Sure, I'll explain. So what has happened in a number of years, going back to, I guess, the early 90s, that we've had state troopers servicing us here in Block Island. The state police has had, we requested the staffing again for this year. Probably the last January timeframe, the Colonel Manning came up to me, emailed me or chatted with me about possibly us funding 2 officers that would go to the academy and would work on Block Island during the season, maybe a little longer in the season. Also, we had a conversation with Chief Monahan when we came on, and we advised them that that's not the route we would like to go, because we've always had state troopers that serve the island, and we did not have to pay the state police for them. Came forward this year with this, when it came time, when I sent my letter out to the state, Colonel Manning, requesting that if state police will be available to service Block Island like they had in previous summers for a number of summers. I received a letter back from him saying that they are running into some staffing problems. They're short, they're down about 30 officers. And as of June, they'll be down 50 officers. They said that they will not be able to provide us with the officers. However, if they would be able to do it via overtime, 85,000. I said, no, you've provided again. I've had a couple of meetings with folks, with Colonel Manning and folks out of Governor McKee's office. And the latest is that they would fund 1, and they're requesting us to fund 1. We are still working on that particular, the latest that they proposed to us. And I've maintained, and based on the conversation we had with the council during the budget work session, they support me in that. We maintain that the state police, since we do have state roads here, that they should be responsible for patrolling those state roads. And hopefully we'll come to an agreement that we'll see the 2 state troopers here on the weekends like we've had in the past few years.
Go ahead.
I'm only, I don't mean to keep beating this, but this was on the news last night. And I think it's only Exeter. Is that right? And us that don't have state?
Yes, currently 2 other communities or governmental agencies that Colonel Manning approached also last late winter, spring, for them to pay for service. One is the Turnpike and Bridge Authority. They asked that in order for state police to patrol the 3 bridges, the 3 assets, which is the Jamestown, Newport, and the Mount Hope Bridge, is that they agreed to an MOA, and it's about $60,000 that the Turnpike and Bridge Authority is paying. And I think it escalates each year based on my conversation with the executive director there. But don't call me on that 55 to 60,000 because I don't have the agreement. The other one, other community that they also entered an MOU, I don't know the dollar amount, is Exeter. Exeter does not have paid the police department. However, the state police, as I understand it, patrols the town of Exeter.
Bill McComb, hold on, Mike.
Exeter doesn't have a police department. State police filed for a grant of the cops like here, and they had received that. The way the state statute reads, if you don't have a police department, you ask the state police to come in because either the police chief steps down, whoever it might be, then you pay that. But for the regular patrol, this happened twice before. For the regular patrol, we're entitled. These roads are part of the state of Rhode Island. And I think I hope that we've contacted our representatives on this and to the governor's office, because it's happened twice before, and they back down on it, saying, hey, wait a minute, from the other side too. So Exeter is a totally different situation. You're not asking them to come in and provide, like say Matt came in last summer to work. That's different as opposed to they're doing their normal patrol. We're part of the state. And I think if you touch base with Nancy Dodd, she had those conversations before We went down this road, the new administration comes in, this pops up every once in a while when the money's tight, but under no circumstances should we be paying.
But they've been here, they've been hearing this, right?
Who's they? Keith is shaking his head yes, so I'm gonna go with yes.
Yeah, what was on television or, finance committee, it's the state, they're talking about this.
Right, what happened
the
was
State
there was
House.
a meeting yesterday afternoon at 5 o'clock. The state police budget was before the Senate Committee on Budgeting and Senate's Finance, that's right. And this did come up. It was raised first by a Representative Flippy, and Colonel Manning went through pretty much what I just said. And then also, it was also echoed by another gentleman, a representative for Providence, who was very supportive of Block Island and basically said the same thing that we're saying. We're a town, we have state roads, like every town in the state. And therefore, we think it's the obligation of the state police to be here and patrolling those roads.
And this may be a good opportunity to get our lobbyists that we have now also involved in that.
He's involved.
Thank you.
Mike,
On the news tonight, they said that the state police did not want to supply us with 6, but 2, and the council turned them down. So how do we equate the 6 and 2?
is that what they said on the news?
Channel 10.
This has never been before the council. The council did not turn them down. This has never been discussed on the point of the council. I actually do support Colonel Manning on this because what I think is that these are state roads, but those state troopers on Block Island are going into fights at Ballard's. They're going into the bar rooms. They're going everywhere else. They're not just on the roads. And Marianne and I had this conversation yesterday and we disagreed. And that's fine. But we have not had this before us to discuss this. This town council has never had a vote on this. So that is absolutely wrong.
How do we get from 6, which was on the news, to 2?
The discussion, I don't know. I don't know where 6 came from. I don't know where that.
There's not any discussion about 6. It's always been 2.
It's always been 2. That is wrong. Like I said, I feel as though Block Island, the state police did us a big favor by giving us Matt, a highly competent captain last year, and they gave him to us for free for, I believe, 3 months. They've always helped us when they could. That's what Manny said at the hearing. And that Exeter grant, didn't that run out many years ago? So it wasn't grant funded.
The town of Exeter does not have the police department. They utilize the state police as their sole source for the police department. That's how the state's set up for it. We're talking about the state police. We're talking about they're doing the patrol the road just like they do with the rest of the state. They will go into it. If there's a problem involved, they'll go into it. They're not just on 95.
I understand that, but the state police that come out here, and I think you'll agree, do a lot more. They do more than assist. They do the work of the town police pretty much. Like I would say that when they come out here, that they do a lot of work for us. And I don't think that, it's not their duty to fill in for us and for free.
It's not for free. We're part of the state. It's not for free. We're part of the state, just like anyone else. We should have the same resources the rest of the state does. And that includes patrolling the roads. That includes the state police services that they provide everywhere. So, I mean, the calls don't come to dispatchers in the state police. They're dispatching our local police department. They may go as a backup or whatever it might be. But if they want, if it comes to a point where they say, listen, I'm just gonna do highway patrol and back up your guys into something, that's fine.
Well, my take on the thing is that if we need to provide our police department with the support that they need to handle the summer crowds. And if we need those state police, those 2 state police, that was only going to be $68,000. And that would have been 2 police, that would have been $32,000 a piece. If we have to hire our own policemen to fill those spots if we could and send them to the academy. It's going to cost this town a lot more money than than $68,000. That's my take on that. Providence, with all due respect to the senator from Providence, the Block Island's tax per capita is like $1.8 million. It has, and we have the lowest taxes in the states. Providence is like 80, and they have the highest taxes in the state. So why would the people from Providence want to pay for our police to patrol our roads?
Because
on top of that,
they're not.
we're paying for it.
In taxes, that
Under the top of the state around,
Yeah.
we're entitled to the same state police response as everyone else. We're talking, they go for 3 weeks, for 2 months on weekends. And that's what they.
That's
come
right.
out. They don't come out, they're not patrolling the rest of the, they're not doing everything. So when you look at it, we pay that.
Yes.
That's part of the, that's our
Yes.
tax dollars that pay that.
Our property, it's not our property taxes that are going to the state. It's the taxes from the sales tax, it's from the hotels, it's from the restaurants. That's where the
what I'm saying is
revenue.
that the state
I'm,
police.
no, you're talking about property taxes, which has nothing to do with money that goes to the state. We don't send the state our property taxes.
Well, I get that, but what I'm saying
Is that
is
what you
all
said? So I can
taxpayers'
see-
money that, why are we, I get that, but the bottom line is the state police that come to Block Island do a lot more work for us. They're part of the police force.
If I can just jump in
You
for a
can
second.
argue if you want, but
No,
that's
I'm-
my feeling on that.
Yeah, no, that's fine. That's your feeling, but my feeling is a little different. And that is, I think they're state roads. I have talked with almost every state policeman who's been here. They're very focused on the roads. They do help out, I agree, when they're needed. And I think this is part of the state police's commitment to towns and state roads. So to me, I don't see why we would be any different than any other town. And in my opinion, which is maybe a bit different, that's fine. In my opinion, I think we should not be paying for the state police. And I think that's part of their civic duty and part of our, what's owed by the state. So
But
it's
what
my
they're saying
point.
is they don't have the staff to do it.
But that's a different issue. I understand that, not.
It's a different issue.
But
I've heard that before.
yeah, but that's, I mean, I could say that about almost every department. Trust me, the sidewalks in Providence, they don't have the staff, but that doesn't mean that you take that obligation away from them. The obligation of the state police, in my mind, is to help patrol the state roads, is to help patrol the state. And right now they're saying we're going to charge one town. And that to me, and I support the town manager, I support this conversation, that to me is sort of their obligation. You know, it may be different than yours, that's fine.
It is. I just see like Exeter. I see they are paying for state police. The Bridge and Turnpike Authority pays for that. But I think because Exeter doesn't have the manpower to do it, we don't have the manpower to do it.
It's not that they do not have a department.
They don't have a department,
They do not have.
so they don't have the manpower to do it.
But that was a choice they made.
The state statute says if you don't, and Chief, you can jump in on this because you're the state statute well, if they don't have a police department,
Then
and you ask them to come in, then the town is responsible for those funds. If we had a bridge, they'd be driving over and patrolling the roads.
To me, this is a choice that Exeter made. And that's fine. And that's a choice they made.
Right.
And then they pay for that service. We have our police department and now it's state roads. So I don't see why the state police wouldn't support state roads, state supported programs and the citizens of the state of Rhode Island with their services. And that's, again, a point of view.
Liz, do you have a
I
comment?
just have a question. Have we paid them before?
No.
Okay, the news actually said they had 8 officers that usually come out.
I'm shocked.
And that, official on Long Island, we rejected the proposal, so you can't always trust, right?
Right.
But be that as it may, I just wanna say, I have worked closely with the state police, and I appreciate when everyone says they're here to patrol the roads. They are, except 3 fatalities, they've been there to help reconstruct, to arrest, to guide the police. I think our police are fantastic. A drowning, I mean, they are there. They would drive me to a scene. I got a ticket one day because I was waiting for them to pick me up. They do more when they come out than just
drive around. So I think they are intending to have a police force in the summer. I don't have a dog in the fight about where the money comes from. I just wanna, they're not just patrolling the roads out, they're working. And I love having them. That's all. I don't know.
The difference is, the difference is when the state police come out here, it's causing overtime. That's where that money's coming from. Molly?
Okay, so I just want to say that I'm finding it very frustrating that as first warden, you either don't understand this or you're actively working against this.
I'm not actually, it's my opinion.
Separate entities. The state police, which are funded by our tax dollars and tax dollars from the rest of the state. And then we have our local New Shore Police Department, which is funded by our property tax dollars. Okay. But we have not seceded from the state of Rhode Island. We're still part of the state of Rhode Island. So there's absolutely no reason why we shouldn't have them. And if they have fewer people, they've got to cut them other places. We don't even get them 7 days a week. We only get them on the weekends. So it's not a big ask on our end. And the other thing I'd like to point out is that my understanding, and I would ask the police chief to clarify this, they do, but my understanding is they do not work at the direction of our police chief. So when the state police are out here, they do their thing. And our police officers do their thing. And as Liz said, if there's a major event, they coordinate. Because that's what they do in every other town in Rhode Island. If there's a major event in Providence, they coordinate. In East Greenwich, they coordinate. So, I mean, I think you do have to clarify with the chief on that, but they do not work at his direction. He can't say to them, and this is again my understanding, I could be wrong. My understanding is he doesn't say to them, could you patrol the NAC? I'm really busy on the south end right now. Like, they do their thing, he does his. So we need that.
I feel they look at it like, I feel like it's looked at as like a detail, like the guy who pushes traffic through and gets paid by the hour. But I think they do more than just details out there.
But they do that if there's a catastrophic event anywhere. They do that in Newport if there's a catastrophic event. They do that, I mean, I actually think Marianne is doing a fabulous job on this. Every button that Bill McComb talked about pushing, she has pushed. Every call that should be made, she has made. And I'm astounded, honestly, that there's any question about this. We probably on a per capita basis export more revenue to the state of Rhode Island than any other town in Rhode Island. And we're not even asking, this is their obligation. I'm actually kind of upset that we're put in a position of begging the state for services that we pay for. It's crazy.
It's your opinion.
Yeah, it sure is.
David Lewis.
I think the real purpose of our gathering tonight is to talk about and make some honest, hard decisions about the things that we can control. And I think that's what the town manager and town council and finance director and the chief of police have worked very hard to do with respect to the police budget. And I think that this is an appropriate budget that's been put forward in front of you. And it does a lot of good things that have been neglected for a long time. It acknowledges with dollars the hard work and excessively strong effort that the entire police community put forth last summer, along with the fire and rescue community when it was in their arena last summer to recover from the disastrous summer of 2020 and begin to restore some normalcy in 2021. So the good news on top of that is that for summer 22, fiscal year 23, the chief has put forth a budget that would represent his ideal for fixing everything in 1 year. My words, not his. I think he asked for several $100,000, $300,000 or $400,000 doing the quick math. I haven't adjusted tonight's numbers to the ones I had looked at last week, but the reality is he didn't get everything he asked for either. And I think he's probably a couple $100,000 short of what he did ask for. And the reality is that represents his own willingness to be part of the town team. And also his acknowledgement that there are relative priorities with any organization about what you can fund in year one, what you can fund in year two, and what can be deferred to years 4 and 5. So this budget recognizes all of that, and I would hate to see us get as guardrailed on the fine work that this particular police budget does for the community with this argument that probably nobody can win with regard to the state police. And we all know how much we value them when they're here. And we remember when Jim Manny was here, even before he was a policeman. So he's always been a great friend to us, and he does the best he can. So the last thing I would like to say is, on January 9th, this is more for the people who are listening on video or on Zoom. On January 19th, the chief of police made an excellent presentation in the form of a year-end report to the council, and it was a part of a regular council meeting. And I listened to that again this past 10 days, and if you can, any of you can find it on the January 19th clerk base agenda, as well as in addition to having the audio, the YouTube video, the video of it. Looking at the presentation that that's also attached, does not fully describe his mission for the year 2022. You really need the audio on the video, on the YouTube audio visuals, so that you can hear his explanation for every improvement he plans to make in the 2022 summer, which is the fiscal year 23 budget. So I can already tell you that the 2022 program is outlined 2 hours and 23 minutes into the recording for that night. And I suggested to all of you to listen to that again and be reminded about all the promise of the future. Thank you.
Thank you, David.
Andre? David, thanks for putting us back on course. Chief Moynihan, am I naive to think that overtime should go down if we're going to double up on officers in the car?
It won't go down. I mean, when we're talking about, we're adding personnel. And we're not necessarily doubling up in the car, but we're adding additional officers to the shifts. Now, if there's vacation or there's sick leave, we're still going to have to supplement. So that's going to be overtime that'll pay in that. But overall, when we look at the budget from previous years on what was spent for either seasonal or reserve officers, whatever we may have called them in the past, of bringing in that seasonal workforce, that number will be less because, we're having that full-time staff and we're doing it with 3 officers per shift. So there'll still be an overtime component that'll need to be funded because there is still those 4 officers still have their benefits. They still have vacation time that they're going to take. When they're on approved leave, their shift is going to have to be backfilled.
I just see a $10,000 increase this year from last year. And again, am I naive to think that it should go down?
It will go down from, and this is really, sorry, Chief, to interrupt, but this is really a matter of what you're using as your baseline. Because while the budget number is an increase over the current year, if you look at the actual for 21, where the overtown's 100,000, and then the year to date, halfway through 22, where you're at 45, which simple doubling brings you to 90, we are headed in a downward trend. So we've been significantly overexpending that line in recent years. So we expect it to go down in total.
Any practices you can do, new or old, to cut that line item would be appreciated, Chief.
Go ahead, Sven.
Chief, also, last time at the meeting last week, you mentioned about the 2 officers and the 3 officers, and I did want to mention to David Lewis specifically, because there have been a number of meetings over the past years when people have talked about speeding on the west side, or are we able to control better outside of town? And that is exactly what the chief mentioned the other day, that now you have an officer that can actually respond and be proactive versus sort of the waiting and reactive. So I'm hoping that that will be improved.
Yes. I was gonna say, I'm glad to hear that Mary Ann's on top of that, and I appreciate that. And I hope the council stays very vigilant on it. We have, so it's clear, we have a good relationship. I had when I was a chief. I know that Chief Monahan does, and so did Chief Calhoun, a good relationship. We're talking about Friday night, Saturday and Sunday for 2.5 months coming on out. So, and when they say it's about shortage in staff, well, short of staff, then you wouldn't have, no matter what money we give you, you wouldn't have it. So that doesn't hold water from that end of it. So I'm glad to see that the council stays vigilant on that. And what will change it is the push to the governor's office at some point. So thank you.
Millie?
Sean McGarry.
Sean McGarry?
Good evening, Andre.
Good evening, Sean. We can hear you.
Yep, I'm going to throw my support in with you. And all the information I have is what we read from the news articles that have run, because none of this proposal has been brought before us. But, you know, according to Manning, they're going to be short 50 officers come June 1st. They have funding issues. The audience also agrees that we need their presence here. If we don't come to some sort of agreement, then I would say we're probably going to be we're going to be shorter on state police enforcement than we have in the past. So we've budgeted money for it. I think $85,000. You know, I'd like to see what the proposal was from the state police. You know, the article claims it was 6 months, 2 officers. You know, is that just weekends? Or is it 6 months solid? Or, you know, what exactly was the proposal? And, you know, I don't think we could really make an honest decision unless we see what that proposal was. You know, we understand they're short-staffed, and they're going to have to make cuts in the way they police the entire state. So, you know, part of that cut is going to be Block Island. So I think without all the information, I don't think we can really have that discussion. But, you know, I agree, Andre, if $68,000 is going to get us that guaranteed support, that's money well spent, because we would spend a lot more than that than augmenting our police department. Thank you.
Thank you, Sean. Anybody else comments on that topic? Seeing none, moving on.
Andre, if I may, I'm sorry, I had my hand up and I was just waiting to be called upon. But if I could just respond to Molly O'Neill's question from before, as far as, so we work very closely with the state police, and I think that was part of my transition over from the state police into the role of chief of police, is that the team that came out last summer, you know, we work hand in hand. They do not answer to me. I'm not in their chain of command, but we work in conjunction. And, you know, again, from my standpoint, it is an absolute necessary requirement that we have them on the island supplementing our police force. And again, and kind of clear up some things, Exeter, state police doesn't patrol Exeter. The state police will respond to calls for service that come in from Exeter, but they're not actively patrolling Exeter. What the MOU is establishing is that state police will be dedicated to those areas: Exeter, the Turnpike and Bridge Authority. And what the proposal to the town would be is that they're dedicating services to us. I think what the biggest question that comes up here is that by them supplying the troopers that they have been doing in the past, it's now causing an overtime liability to their budget. And the question comes in, who pays for that liability? Does the state of Rhode Island, does the state police, or does New Shoreham? And I think, again, those discussions are being had with the manager and the governor's office and others. And I think that's what needs to be resolved. It's not so much that that they're not available to come in and at the request or work with us. It just comes down to who's responsible for paying the overtime budget because of the staffing shortages that it's creating.
Thank you, Matt. And just to clarify my position, you need the tools that you need to police the island in the summertime. If the town has to pay for that, I'm fine with that. Where are we?
Page 13.
Any comments on Public Works? Public Works. Any questions on harbors? Building official? Recreation. Library. Oh, I'm sorry. You want me to I thought you already looked at the budget.
Well, I have a lot of times, but still.
All right.
My questions.
Can I ask a general question?
Yeah.
It's just probably to Amy more than anybody. I have a question about fuel. Like, yeah, so when we budget $2,000, then we look at our fuel prices that I don't think are going to go down anytime soon. They have dropped a little, but we're looking at the cost of everything is so high. Is that, you guys have sort of a wiggle room percentage? Rob, repeat the people.
And this question did come up the other night, and it's a good one. We have not adjusted the fiscal year 23 budget with any kind of flat cushion, which for a period of years we were doing. We would do a 15% increase based on how fuel prices were moving, you know, or whatever was appropriate. We haven't done that in this budget. You know, it's another area of risk. But given all the components, I think there's enough space for us to accommodate, assuming things don't go wildly overboard. I think we can accommodate some continued increases of a moderate range. And yeah, certainly if it were to continue over the long term, we'd make adjustments next year. We can do that too. We should do that anyway.
Molly?
So I know everybody's looking for wiggle room in the budget, but I would like to advocate for putting $3,000 back into the book line. And I did listen to Kristen's explanation about digital books and you know, real books. And I thought a couple of things about it. So I looked up, just curious, yeah, the curiosity of noticing that I looked up how many digital books I used last year, right? So, which was almost 40. And the thing is, I'm gonna go right back to checking out real books now that that COVID isn't such an issue. although digital books are terrific and I love audiobooks and all that, but I don't think I'm alone, right? I think we discovered that we all do the exact same thing. I think a lot of people are gonna go back to checking more books out of the library now that they don't seem as if they all have cooties. So, I think you're gonna find like a lot more parents like checking out stacks and kids' books, and so I just want to advocate for, if there is some wiggle room, putting that $3,000 back, because I think your husband, as Kristen said, there's been a lot of growth in the digital books, but I still have to advocate for books with pages. Thanks.
I thank you, Molly. I was actually very surprised when we heard the digital versus real book numbers. And it'll be interesting to see how those trends go. And we had a lengthy discussion around that the other day as well. So I hear you and thank you for making that, but it's going to be interesting to see those trends. So.
GIS technology, any comments on that? We all good on GIS? Boards and commissions. I just have a question. I wasn't at the meeting the other night. How did North Light make out? Was there?
There's a pretty extensive discussion regarding that during the capital budget.
Okay. Boards and commissions, going once? Community support? Questions or comments? Just waiting for everybody else. Fully funding the Block Island Volunteer, 285. Can you come back with an impact on that, the next public hearing, or?
That's coming somewhere else.
Right. That's what I'm asking for the next public hearing. I'd like to fully fund them.
So you're asking Amy to decide, or Mary Ann to decide where it's gonna come from? This question.
I'm asking if we can fully fund it. This is something I want to just be fully.
I
funded.
understand that. What I'm saying is if it has to come from somewhere else, are you asking for recommendations on that? Is that what you're looking for?
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, my hope is that at the end of the next public hearing, that we are able to, well, hopefully have a public discussion, an open discussion about some areas that are pluses and minuses. And we had many of these during the discussions over the last two sessions, where maybe there's some areas to take from, maybe there's some areas to grow. You just identified the fire department.
I don't know, how does the rest of the council feel about that?
Well, I think we have to.
The one out here?
No, but I think my point was, I plan to try and say, hey, if I want to give to A, I personally recommend taking it from B, or maybe half from B and half from C, or whatever it is. Because I think from my point of view, if I want to do 50,000 to the fire department, okay, where would I personally take that from? You may have a different point of view, Keith, Mark, Martha. So I think at the end of the next meeting, I would love to, all of us have that opinion and then be able to roll those numbers up. That's my feeling about next steps.
Thank you, Sven.
Let me try to marry both of your ideas together. There's no reason why we can't get some recommendations from the town manager and finance director prior to the next meeting to be better prepared.
My only point.
It would be at the other meeting. It would be at the meeting.
My only point was that this is their recommendation. And at a certain point, we have to take ownership of the budget because it is our budget. And I think just keep putting it off on other people isn't fair. if these are the things we need to do.
Understood, but I'm a fan also of fully funding this line item too.
That's what I'm saying. If you
Yeah.
then go through the budget and
I will,
pull out
but I'd like
what
to
you
hear
think.
the professionals' ideas too, along with whatever I might have in my head.
But they'll tell you if you're wrong.
Bill?
I think they kind of gave you that answer, when you didn't have the $50,000 when it came up, they presented a budget. And then when that 50,000 became available, because the Blue Cross, I guess, came in lower, they put that back in, so they kind of did that for you already.
They allocated those dollars to those three areas that Marianne talked about before.
Any more comments on?
I have a question. What would it cost if we didn't have volunteer fire? Besides a lot of foundations.
It's a good question. I don't think that can be answered. Amy?
More than 50?
Yes, more than 50.
More than 50.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, the only point I was trying to make, we're at the cap and we either have to take money out of other places or go into reserve. And it's, at some point, we have to make that decision. That's what I'm saying.
And I appreciate that, I understand. I just am thinking like, I'm just looking at, maybe the take our because it's not paid people. And that we, I just want to support rescue squad, fire department, what they do for us. And they're there no matter what, and I just want to read that. And I think we have.
We all, I think we all do. It's how to get there. It's very easy to say, oh, we're gonna add that money, but where's it coming from? That's the hard, well, Jess, you know that. That's the hardest part of doing a budget. It isn't giving the money away. It's where it comes from. And you come up short.
I don't envy the council. I think it becomes really tough, but I think individually, when you look at everything, it's warranted and it has its meaning. And I think everyone would like to fund everything they can. One of the things though, and I think this money with the fire department we're talking about is for the radio system. Is that correct?
No, this is operating.
Okay.
Operating, not capital.
I'll let that go.
Any more?
I still think you got a tough job.
Any more comments on the community support? School support? Capital, does you want to go through capital?
No.
Debt service? No, I know.
I don't want to pay that debt.
We can't change anything that was not here.
Anybody else, any comments?
Well, are we going to capital tax or not?
Yeah, if you want to go through capital.
Capital is always what gets rated first.
I'm sorry. We're talking CIP budget, not capital tax, right?
I'm talking about what's in the budget, capital tax.
Any comments on capital tax?
Was this discussed the other night? I'm sorry, I wasn't here.
Yes, it was, but that's okay.
Well, how come you guys didn't find places to take money out of?
And you did tell me. So what's going on in life?
We heard from the council that, at least this is what Amy and I walked away with. We heard from the council that possibly look into ways to fund some of the North Light So we're working on that. We also heard from the councils to try to way to fund what we're calling the, where there's dead spots that the fire department had spoke to us about. And we are looking into ways to do that. And I need to follow up with the conversation with Chief Moynihan when he comes back tomorrow, because he's had some discussion in that regard. So we will be appeared at the next public hearing to have that conversation.
And if I can just further the Northlight question to Martha's or somebody's question. It was the $250,000, which is the budget that was proposed by the Northlight group. That's in the out years, and we talked about trying to bring some of that forward. So that was, like Marianne said, and much like with the fire department, where does that money come from and how does that work? So
that 250 has just been pushed up to another year?
It was just presented when the budget was, when the budget was presented, we put that in next fiscal year.
So does he have any money this year to get his windows at least, to get the building sealed? That's I think the bottom line is to get the envelope sealed. Is there any money put in for that? Was Robbie happy with when he left the meeting the other night? No.
Because there wasn't, I think it was loud and clear the other night that he wanted to move some of that money forward. I think there was a lot of dialogue and positives, but we'll have to see how the budget process goes. So it was somewhere, whether it was 120 or 80 or something of that nature, trying to move it forward to this budget. And it hasn't been stamped, let me put it that way.
We talked about trying to identify those. We talked about staging, over time. He said that it's challenging to do that because you want to do a lot of things at the same time, because getting crews out there is challenging. So I hope we both, it's my hope that the conclusion of that is that we're going to kind of go to the drawing board and say, for example, could you do windows and paint the trim this year? Like, and is it possible to, to break these things down? Because, moving the entire 250 into this capital budget is, is challenging. But you could have a long-term, a 2-year project to get it right.
I believe at that time, Robbie talked as much about the lantern as versus the envelope. That was his, it was 120 for the lantern, and then we talked about the envelope. So I think
What's the lantern?
there was work that had to be done that Robbie's identified.
It's painting.
Already?
Wow.
Yeah, the water comes in, no matter how tight it is in there. The water still, when it blows, still gets in there. And that's happened since the day it was built. There was just always someone there to maintain it living there. I think painting was like $30,000.
Yeah. I mean, it was rebuilt
Right.
12 years ago.
Right.
Just tenth the thing.
Anybody has any comments on the capital improvement? Molly?
I just have a question, could you explain what the infrastructure fund is?
Sure. And I don't remember exactly what year, but roughly 2017. Actually, probably 2016, the town council voted to set aside funds that were received from Deepwater and National Grid from the initial easement, and then some ancillary dollars that came in for additional property uses related to that. And they identified that those funds would be used specifically for infrastructure improvements around the town. And so for the last few years, we have been drawing down on that fund to supplement the capital budget and take care of one-time infrastructure improvements. And in 22, we'll be drawing down the last of those funds.
Thank you.
Sure.
Anybody else? Bill?
I'm just kind of confused on where we are right now on the.
We're just sort of going through the capital improvement program.
Just the whole capital budget?
Yeah.
Right now, we're on page 21 of 22, Bill.
Thank you. We're on page 42, you may not have it.
Oh, hold on, Millie. Sean McGarry. Sean McGarry, you
I
go.
am. Yeah, I'm here.
Okay.
Both the Southeast Light and the Historic District, I mean, the Historical Society were given $1 million grants by Orsted for historic preservation. Would it be unreasonable to ask one or both of those entities to include also maintenance of the North Light into their program?
I can't speak for the Southeast Light, but I knew that they're not a town entity. And they've spent all the money they got.
Yeah, I'm on the board of both. I'm sorry if I seem like I'm yelling here. I'm just trying to be heard. That wasn't grant money, that was money that came through a lawsuit. And I don't know if we're going to, I can't remember if the North Light is on the list for the current what is it, the cultural whatever, cultural heritage. It had a lot of things on it. I don't remember if the North Light was or not. That's outside of our budget.
You good, Sean?
Yes, thank you.
Bill?
Can you explain the highway aprons?
So those are a couple of aprons that dirt roads that lead eventually into some of the paved roads. Pilot Hill is one that comes to mind. We're looking to, over the next 3 years, it's $50,000 a year to budget funds for that.
And I'm just wondering, when the council's looking at that, is there any possibility of maybe putting that out 1 year from the fire, that kind of thing, if you can look at from there? And I just have to look at what I, you know.
That actually was mentioned.
Any other comments on the Capitol? Going once? The next is a motion to adjourn.
So can I just quickly say one thing before?
Go ahead. Well, hold on. Bill, you got one more final? Okay.
2022 council meeting, that's gonna be what it's online, but January 4th.
And what is that?
The audit report.
Oh, yeah.
Is the 45,000 for the camera system, is that based off of a bid or? And I think in the police, no, is the police, is that the body camera or is that for surveillance camera?
That's in the building cameras.
The cell block.
Right, do you know how many cameras we're talking about? So I do a lot of cameras, it seems like they're all for high numbers, is that based off of a bid or? I don't know if the chief does that.
So I think that was also the number the initial factor.
Going once, last on the final? I know, I'm just, if anyone's got a question while she's looking. What's that?
Sorry. So can I talk directly to Millie?
Oh, sure.
Great, thanks. Could you explain to everybody what the process is, or maybe just notify so many people? I didn't know this till last year when Molly told me. Once the minutes for a meeting have been approved, then the agenda for that meeting no longer resides in the agenda category. You have to go to a different folder called the minutes.
That's correct.
You want?
What you are saying is that on clerk, he's talking about on clerk base. On the side panel, there is a section of agendas, and those are agendas that have not had minutes attached. Once the minutes are attached, they drop into a folder down below that says minutes. So if you are looking for an agenda and you don't see it there, you think, oh, there's no agenda for that date. It's actually just in the subfolder minutes.
So in the example that was just cited by Mary Ann for the audit, for the 2021 audit, it is in fact in the minutes for the January 4th, 2022 meeting. But you got to look in the minutes folder, not in the agenda folder.
Yeah. Once it's really interest, that's how clerk base does it. Once the minutes are approved, everything's in the minutes and it's not the agenda. And it took me a while to figure that out.
And can I just one last comment on that, because it was brought up? Thank you for getting the minutes done so quickly over the last number of months. I think everybody appreciates it.
We'll keep her another.
And I just said I take it one day at a time. The current video surveillance equipment at the police station is outdated and needs to be replaced. This fall, a prisoner did destroy one of the cameras in the cell block. The replacement of the camera is not possible at a reasonable price. The current system is analog, and it needs to be converted, obviously, to an IP-based system, which will allow for cloud storage and easy access. The project is divided into two phases. The 45 is for phase one, which will involve replacing cameras in the cell block, booking area, interview room, entryway, and to the booking room. The capacity for audio and video recording in the area is required to meet accreditation standards and comply with state law. So, and
Answer your question.
sorry, a quote was obtained to request the funding. A quote was retained. Matt got a quote, so we knew how to fund the project.
Will that quote be available at all? That's big number.
I think once we get the specifications and finalize it, yeah. But it's a quote. Yeah, it was a quote, not a bid. Exactly.
I mean, it's just, how many cameras did it say? I mean, it's 45,000, so it's two phases. That's gonna be 45,000 or how many cameras?
It doesn't say how many cameras, but it's in every cell block. It's in, what did I say? The cell block, booking area, interview room, entryway into the booking area.
And 45,000 was the price to do that camera system?
The phase one to be completed in year one.
Phase two is what?
The combined, it's 92.
92,000?
Yep.
You know, let me know when you're putting bids out. I'll speak with the chief on that. There may be some other avenues you can look at, so I'm glad you're talking about that. Andre, also on the funds for the property, the power company, have we discussed that, or is that still, is that on the? Yes. Do we go by already, or is it?
Go ahead.
So that was discussed the other night. If you look, there was 400 in the budget, Amy, and it's on page 2 of the capital improvement plan. It's 400 for next year, which is the year before the 8 million for the building.
So can you explain what the 400 is for, or what we might be voting on to purchase, or?
At this moment, as based on the meeting the other day, it's the land that building would be located on.
Okay. So this property,
No, go ahead.
I think at this point, everyone knows. So what has happened is what we're in the process of doing. There's a piece of, we're looking to construct a public safety fire bond on property that is currently owned by the BIPCO. We're looking to carve out a piece of the property. We have an appraisal has been done. That appraisal, I've discussed it with the council. I have forwarded the appraisal to Block Island Power Company. Matter of fact, I just called Jeff Wright a day or two ago to see where they are with it because he needed to bring it to their board. It's something that was discussed right after I had started here. There's some discussion going on, but because of what was going on with the litigation in BIPCO, we decided it was best to wait. Now that that particular litigation is behind us, we're revisiting that. We just think with the council that the location and the zoning of that area would be a perfect place for a fire bond. We will be going, if everything works out with BIPCO, which I think it will be presenting that to the voters at the financial town meeting in May.
so what I would hope at the meeting that if we are gonna make a vote on something to that end of it, that it's clear what the property is, obviously, but also what the intent is that it's going to be used for, or if we don't know, whatever it might be on that end of it. And I think there'll be much more support from the public, knowing that what the plan is and you know, if there's been some engineering, so whatever it might be from that end of it, because I think it's kind of been floating around for so long. I think you guys have a good idea, but the public in general doesn't know that end of it. So from support wise, yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Motion to adjourn. Mark? No, I got a second. I'm asking you.
The part that came up on the radios about the dead spots, I think it's important that everyone knows that, you know, everyone's referring it back to the fire department. It really is the communication for all of the entities in the town, the police, fire, rescue, water, sewer. I've been involved with all the radio systems going back from when they were analog, from the Western states to this. Right now, we've never had as many of the local agencies in the town, and some that are, you know, including the water, power company and so forth, on the system that we have right now. So I know there needs to be worked out on that, but I think it comes back to people like, oh, it's the fire department because, you know, Howell has run with a lot of it, but it really is, it's all of the community. So whether it's that's borne the cost by the fire department or else, I'm not the same. I just think everyone should be aware that this, I think 200, what 200 radios? Over 200 radios on that system between the police, fire, and everything else with it too. So I think an education aspect to that would be beneficial to people. Thank you.
Motion has been made and seconded. All those in favor, Keith? Martha? I'm in favor. Mark? Motion carries.
Thank you guys very much.
Thank you.